the idea of coherence and thinking about presentations as kind of forming some type of wholeness is an idea that I get from both Babu Zim Nqawana and Babu himself. So when everyone was just really about recording songs, these two giants were already thinking about suites, which is a thing that comes from Western classical music, but they were thinking about ensembles of dots, things that would hold together. And Babu Nqawana did it almost on every record, where he groups particular musics that speaks to a certain theme together. And so I was thinking in that way as well, and it's interesting that Babu Nqawana is a disciple of Ibrahim. And I was trying to respond to Ibrahim. So there are all of these resonances and convergences, like where things are meeting. So when I thought about opening, I thought about this. It's really a catastrophic moment around the world. So the one who has the voice is really privileged. In fact, the one who breathes is really privileged. So that it brings a responsibility. Are we speaking on behalf of the ones that can't speak for themselves? Do we say anything about them? And so I think that what really informed the first movement, it was Isbibitwane, a scream. What happens on the other side of text when you can't really speak? A scream emerges. And a scream is something that's theorized a lot in Afrofuturism as well. Mamu Lincoln, and people have been using the scream as a code, Mamire Makeba, and all of these people. So for me, it had to start there, and also the idea of forgiveness. In some texts, Derrida reflects on South Africa and the Truth and Reconciliation Project, and some of the troubles that such a project presented, in the ways in which it enunciates forgiveness within the limits of Christianity, for instance, and how do other people forgive outside of that register.
Sure. And
if we're seeking forgiveness from me, you should at least entertain my world, because that's what would make it meaningful. And so he speaks about this, the forgiving the unforgivable. Basically trying to say that forgiveness is impossible. But the closest we come to it is by forgiving the unforgivable. That's the only time we ever have to forgive, when we're forgiving things that are unforgivable.
Sure.
So I start in that space of the unforgivable, and then I go to Omnyama. Omnyama, really, again, Black aesthetic, Blackness, the weight of the Black biography, and the ways in which it liberates and suffocates us at the same time. And in the ways in which it's fugitive as well as escaping. We don't really know our stories that well. And these stories are changing, and there are new stories. So while we're dealing with the archive and the challenge of the archive, we're already missing out on what's happening now. And then the third movement, of course, is me speaking, but it's part of the suite where I'm thinking about ritual, ongoing rehearsal, and study. And Imvunge really is a celebration, it's the collective. It's where I'm trying to invite all of us into this, it's a circle, it's the fireplace. So we're putting the song in this imbaula and dancing around this as kind of an echo chamber. And I know an echo chamber has been utilized in trying to understand societies, but I think we have other kinds of echo chambers that are important to us, these spaces of discourses and how we situate ourselves in these discourses, and we question as well. So it's not only accepting what things were in the past, but it's to be driven by inquiring and questioning anyway, and not trying to reach any conclusion. So that really is the suite, and in the end, it's a little prayer, which is something that I really resonated with from Music is King. Soweto writes this song, and it speaks about uzama, and how do we bless our efforts. He speaks about busisa imzamo yetu, busisa uzama wetu. And this thing started to speak to me all of these things as efforts, as attempts anyway. So that's the sweet.
Amazing. It's a Q&A session. But I really felt that I have the doctor here, and he's done all the studies, and I think just contextualizing the importance of telling, of narrative. If NPR is such an important platform that brings the world to one small little stage to tell their global message, for me it's important to find out from you where you are with your understanding, firstly from your studies, but your understanding of studying the world as you travel, that it simplifies things as opposed to complicate. And I just wanted you to share a little bit of, as you journey the world, as you find yourself on NPR, and these unique platforms that are already speaking of where you are treading, what you are leaving behind and what you are taking as an artist.
Right, I think there is a study about what they call African fractals, and African fractals is really an understanding that every little thing that comes from Africa has a code, it has a DNA. And so that's really been the ways in which I'm thinking about situating our DNA around the world. And also, of course, when we're thinking about Africa, we do not kind of divorce the diasporas. And when I started touring, I, of course, naturally would go to Europe more than the US. And this kind of troubled me in many ways about what continues to be this middle passage, what continues to be this divide, what continues to leave behind, what continues to create this binary on either side of the Atlantic. And so I am kind of biased in a sense that I want to play in the US more. And in fact, I was reflecting with my friends that I had challenges with the booking agent this year, and which resulted to me really not frequenting the US as much as I want. Last year, during the elections in the US, I was touring. And it was interesting how each and every concert that we played was informed by either the silence or the noise of the people. And metaphorically speaking, of course, but you could feel in the room the denseness of the energy. But also I was having several conversations in counterpoint with various artists and how they were feeling about the change that was to come. And I, of course, played until the change came, and I was in LA, I think, at the time. And there was such a divide. Many people were, I think I stayed in Boston for a day where people were celebrating Trump and victory, and you go to LA where people felt otherwise. And so there was all of these conflicts. So part of me traveling around the world is really to understand that there is conflict and to not exoticize healing then in that sense, and not to be, I'm not gonna use certain words, but there is a sense in which the idea of healing lacks criticalness for me.
Sure.
And I think healing is a very critical subject, because who heals? Who heals and who is healing? And how? And so it's almost, very loose for artists. And it's very, we use it very loosely. And so for me, when conflict arises, that's when we test the effectiveness of the healing potency in our sound. So it has to be tested. And so, it's very natural to think about Black bodies in the US and how that healing is urgent. I don't really take the subway that often because I have a phobia for the noise, and it's so aggressive. But Zwelakhe again and Kabelo this time around convinced me you should take it again. In fact, we took it, Linda Skaka the other time. it became something else. I realized that, I really don't want to do the subway. But part of what's happening in the subway is the amplification of this violence and the truth of things. And for me, it's interesting metaphorically to be thinking about traveling underneath. And most of those people that travel underneath, they will often jump off and stay in the proximity, but the level of socialization, of socializing, is very different because they live underground, and that's mostly black populations. So sometimes we're traveling and we extract these metaphors of like, why does the subway has to be so loud in current times when the technology is so sophisticated? I mean, I take a train from Switzerland to France, super quiet, there's business class options and all of those kind of things. But for black bodies, the noise is important as a soundtrack.
Sure.
So there's a sense in which going in that, if you listen, I have recordings of the subway. It's like gunshots, it's all kinds of things. It's earthquakes, it's all kinds of things. So that soundtrack is attached to the black body. And by way of economics. Because if you have the money, you don't have to take the subway.
Yeah.
So these are some of the observations. And of course, when I'm in Europe, enjoying Snonjazi. St. Moritz, so but you can see how, and also we need that as well, because this suffering also, we need a break from it. So sometimes when we, in Europe, we feel that break, but as soon as we walk inside the airport and the black body is kind of criminalized, they always pull us to the side. There's no particular reason. So, but it's also a reminder that even when we're in St. Moritz, but this is not ours.
Yeah.
So these are some of the things that you go to Japan, for instance, where there's such a deep level of humility.
Yeah.
The staff at the Blue Note Tokyo, for instance, me and Lazi actually didn't want to come back home, really.
Yeah.
Tokyo was so amazing. But these are some of the experiences around the world. But I'm just trying to say that they don't stop being critical. And our healing project is a critical project.
Thank you very much. I think I'll leave there from my point of view. I think that's where I was about saying, when we understand ourselves, our systems of healing, aren't we then able to transfer it for the world to understand what it means to survive as a black person? I was saying that people appreciate creativity that comes from Africa, but they don't understand that on a daily basis, we are forced to dig deeper because we are surviving every other thing. So your artistry would naturally be at a different enhanced level. So, absolutely. And then I think, so we need to apply depth of thought in terms of what do we tell the world. I love reading about how the Japanese talk about minimalism, how they talk about the phrases, even the Swedish have the ones, how you speak about something, the less you say. You know what I'm saying? We learn from everybody else, but our own phrases are not going out there. And I think, you use them a lot, to do so. This is your tools.
That's the backdrop. It's not even the backdrop. Why did I use that word? It is actually the property. It's right at the center of things. I always speak about how the ear allows us into the world of aesthetic, but the heart allows us into the world of the soul. And so when we listen, silalele, but it doesn't mean uthi siyezwa. So how then, as healers, how do we formulate strategies for concoction? I think in 2017, I put out an album which was attempting to think about what concoction might be, ikambi. So once I have an understanding of the sound or the sonic properties, then I'm careful with dosages too.
Yes. Yes.
as a dosage. So I think the implications therefore of healing and situating ourselves in the middle is that critical, that sometimes we can overdose our audiences with these things. And this is why I'm thinking a lot about space. It's interesting you should mention the East, the Zen mysticism, and how they speak about a no mind, for instance. In Zen mysticism, they also speak about emptiness, vast emptiness. And we're thinking about those subjects as part of our healing, you know, to allow the echo. How do we open space? And how do we become intentional about that when we're improvising, for instance? He would know like how I emphasize the issue of space as something that you play as well. So we often think that space opens itself when we're improvising. It's when we're breathing. But actually, we can be more intentional about the orchestration of the space. So when we're breathing. So these are some of the things and the implications of even thinking of ourselves as healers.
Because we all are part of this universe, right?
Totally.
Siyabonga.